My sister wanted $50 for her wedding. When I said no, she turned my whole family against me. I'll never forget the sound of my phone buzzing at 2 in the morning. Not the gentle hum of a text message, but the insistent ringing that meant someone thought their emergency was worth waking me up. When I saw Vanessa Mobile flash across the screen, my stomach tightened before I even answered. "Marcus, I need you to come to Mom's house right now." My sister's voice was high-pitched, frantic in that particular way she'd perfected over the years, the tone that made you feel like the world was ending, even when it was just another manufactured crisis. "Vanessa, it's 2 in the morning. What's wrong? Is Mom okay? Just get here. If you actually cared about this family, you'd already be on your way." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in my modest Seattle apartment, my used Honda parked in the lot below, staring at the ceiling and wondering how my 34 years on this planet had led to this moment. The software engineer who'd built a quiet fortune through careful planning and disciplined saving, being guilt-tripped by a sister who couldn't balance a checkbook to save her life. But she was family. So I got dressed and drove across town to our mother's small house in Beacon Hill, the same house where we'd grown up, where I'd watched our parents lose everything when their restaurant failed during the recession. That failure had shaped me, taught me that money wasn't just numbers in an account, but security, safety, the difference between sleeping peacefully and lying awake terrified of losing it all. When I arrived, every light in Mom's house was blazing. Through the front window, I could see Vanessa pacing, her phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly. My mother sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, looking smaller and older than her 68 years. I let myself in with my key. Vanessa barely glanced at me, still talking on her phone. "No, babe, I'm handling it. My brother just got here. He's going to help us, I promise." That word, us, should have been my first warning. She finally hung up and turned to face me, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. Vanessa had always been beautiful in that effortless way that made life easier for her. Tall, elegant features, the kind of presence that attracted attention without trying. She'd built a modest social media following on that appeal, posting lifestyle content that suggested a glamour her actual bank account couldn't support. "Derek proposed," she announced, thrusting her left hand toward me. A diamond caught the light, bigger than I would have expected given what I knew about her boyfriend's financial situation. "Congratulations," I said carefully, looking at our mother who managed a tired smile. "That's wonderful news, Nessa. But why the emergency call at 2 a.m.? Because we need to start planning immediately. I've already found the perfect venue, this amazing estate in Napa Valley. We can have the ceremony in the vineyard at sunset, and there's this incredible photographer who did Bethany Morrison's wedding last year, you know, the influencer. She has 3 million followers, and her wedding photos were—" "Vanessa," I interrupted gently, "how much are we talking about here?" She waved her hand dismissively. "It's my wedding, Marcus. My one special day. You can't put a price on that." But of course she already had. Over the next hour, sitting at our mother's kitchen table while she showed me Pinterest boards and Instagram saves and vendor quotes, the number emerged: $50,000. $50,000 for a single day. "The venue alone is $18,000, but that includes tables and chairs," she explained, scrolling through her phone. "The photographer is $8,000 for 12 hours of coverage, but Marcus, her work is literally art. And the dress? I found this designer in New York who makes custom gowns. She dressed 2 cast members from that Netflix show." "Nessa, where is this money supposed to come from?" I asked, already knowing the answer from the way our mother wouldn't meet my eyes. "Well, Derek's parents are contributing $5,000, she said, as if this was perfectly reasonable. "And Mom said she could help with some of it, but obviously she doesn't have much since Dad died." Our father had passed 3 years ago, leaving our mother with enough life insurance to keep the house and live modestly, nothing more. The idea of her dipping into those carefully managed funds made my chest tight. "And the rest?" I pressed. Vanessa finally looked directly at me, her expression shifting into something calculated. "You're my only brother, Marcus. You make good money. I know you've got savings. This is what family does. We help each other with important things." There it was. The assumption that had been building since I'd gotten my first real job after college, since I'd started climbing the corporate ladder while living like I was still making minimum wage. My sister, and honestly most of my extended family, had no idea how much I'd actually accumulated. They saw the used car, the modest apartment, the wardrobe from department stores, and they assumed I was comfortable but not wealthy. Only my financial advisor knew about the investment accounts, the index funds, the rental property I'd bought 2 years ago, the careful architecture of wealth I'd constructed in deliberate silence. Nessa, I can't or won't. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum. Because there's a difference, Marcus. Can't means you don't have it. Won't means you're choosing to let your own sister down on the most important day of her life. I'm saying I can contribute $5,000, I said evenly. The same as Derek's parents. That seems fair. The transformation in my sister's face was immediate and terrible. Her features hardened, her eyes narrowing into slits that reminded me suddenly of the tantrums she'd thrown as a child, except now she was 29 years old, and the weapons at her disposal were far more sophisticated. 5,000? She laughed, but there was nothing amused in the sound. You make 6 figures at that tech company and you're offering me $5,000? Mom? Are you hearing this? Your son would rather hoard his money than help his own sister. Vanessa, that's not fair, our mother began, but she looked exhausted, caught between her children as she'd been so many times before. You know what? Forget it. Vanessa grabbed her purse from the counter. I should have known better than to expect anything from you, Marcus. You've always been selfish. Even when we were kids, you couldn't share, couldn't think about anyone but yourself. Some things never change. She stormed out, leaving our mother and me sitting in the harsh kitchen light, the silence heavy between us. She doesn't mean it, Mom said quietly. She's just excited, overwhelmed. You know how your sister gets. But I did know how my sister got, and that was exactly the problem. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to reach Vanessa multiple times. My calls went to voicemail. My texts remained unread, or at least unanswered. I sent her a thoughtful message explaining my position, offering again to contribute $5,000 and to help her create a realistic budget for a beautiful wedding that wouldn't require going into debt. I even suggested she might consider a smaller ceremony and use the money instead for a down payment on a house, something that would build equity rather than disappearing in a single day. Radio silence. Then the social media posts started. The first one was subtle enough that I almost missed it. A photo of Vanessa and Derek at some trendy restaurant, the caption reading, "When your partner's family shows up for you in ways your own never will. Grateful for real love today." Within hours, the comment section filled with friends and acquaintances asking what was wrong, offering support, calling whoever had hurt her a variety of uncreative names. Vanessa didn't respond to anyone, just let the speculation build. The next post was more direct. A quote card with elegant script over a sunset background. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters. Some people have money but no heart. I stared at my phone screen, my jaw clenching. She was painting a narrative, carefully constructing a story where I was the villain, without ever naming me directly. It was smart, in a manipulative way. If she'd accused me outright, I could have defended myself. But this way, she could play the victim while maintaining plausible deniability. The real damage, though, came through channels I didn't immediately see. I found out later that Vanessa had gone to our mother in tears, weaving an elaborate story about how I'd not only refused to help but had insulted Derek, calling him a loser and predicting their marriage would fail within a year. She claimed I'd told her she was shallow and materialistic, that I'd said I was ashamed to have her as a sister. None of it was true, not a single word. But my mother, who loved both her children and wanted to believe the best of everyone, tried to mediate. She called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice careful and pained. "Marcus, honey, I think maybe you and Vanessa need to sit down and talk through some things." "I'd love to, Mom. She won't return my calls." "She says you were very hurtful when you two last spoke. She said you criticized her choices, her relationship, her whole life." I closed my eyes, standing in my small apartment kitchen, gripping the phone tighter. "Mom, that's not what happened. I offered to contribute $5,000 to her wedding. I was respectful and supportive. I just can't fund the entire thing. She didn't say you needed to fund the entire thing, Mom said, and I could hear the confusion in her voice, the way Vanessa had twisted the narrative just enough to make me seem unreasonable. She just wanted help from her brother. I offered help. $5,000 is help. But Marcus, you do make good money. Would it really hurt you to do a bit more for your sister's wedding? And there it was, the crack in my mother's faith in me, the seed of doubt Vanessa had planted. The idea that I was being stingy, withholding, choosing money over family. Mom, I have my reasons for my budget. I'm happy to explain them. But I need you to trust that I'm not being arbitrary or cruel here. She sighed. I just want my children to get along. I want both of you to be happy. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about the restaurant my parents had poured their life savings into, about the foreclosure notices and the bankruptcy proceedings, about watching my mother cry at the kitchen table while she tried to figure out how to feed us, about the promise I'd made to myself that I would never be that vulnerable, that helpless, that dependent on circumstances beyond my control. My frugality wasn't about being cheap. It was about being safe. But apparently, safety made me the bad guy. The campaign against me intensified. My Aunt Linda called, her voice tight with disappointment, saying she'd heard I'd refused to help Vanessa and thought I should reconsider. My cousin Jason sent a Facebook message asking if everything was okay, because Vanessa seems really hurt by something. The next Sunday dinner invitation, a monthly tradition at my Uncle Robert's house, came via group text to everyone except me. When I texted my uncle directly to ask about it, he replied tersely, "Given the current family dynamics, thought it best to keep things simple this month." I'd been uninvited from my own family gatherings. Vanessa's masterstroke came 3 weeks later. She created a private Facebook group for our extended family, about 40 people in total, ostensibly to plan our grandmother's upcoming 80th birthday party. Everyone was added except me. I only found out because my cousin Maria, who'd always been kind to me, sent me a screenshot with a message. "Marcus, I don't know what's going on between you and Vanessa, but I thought you should see this." The screenshot showed a long post from my sister, dripping with wounded nobility. I want to thank everyone who's reached out with support during this difficult time. Planning a wedding should be a joyful experience, but it's been overshadowed by family conflict. I've tried to handle this privately, but I think it's important that everyone understands the situation. When I asked my brother for help with my wedding, not to pay for everything, just to contribute as family, he not only refused, but said some really hurtful things about Derek and about my choices in life. I've tried to reconcile, but he won't acknowledge how his words affected me. I'm moving forward with my wedding planning, grateful for those who have shown up. Blood doesn't make you family. Love and support do. Thank you all for being my real family. The comments were a knife in my gut. Relatives I'd known my entire life, people who'd watched me grow up, were buying the narrative wholesale. "So sorry you're going through this, sweetie. You deserve better. Your brother should be ashamed of himself. Family is everything. We're here for you. Vanessa." Real family shows up. My Uncle Robert, who'd been like a second father to me after my dad died, wrote, "Disappointed to hear this, Vanessa. I always thought Marcus was more grounded than this. Wealth changes people, I guess." I felt something break inside my chest reading those words. These people had known me for decades, and yet they believed I'd transformed into some heartless miser overnight without ever hearing my side of the story. I drafted a response 10 times and deleted it 10 times. Anything I said would sound defensive, would look like I was attacking Vanessa when she'd positioned herself as the victim. She'd built a narrative fortress, and any assault on it would only make me look worse. So I did something I'd learned in the cutthroat world of tech startups. I gathered data. I started with the wedding itself. Using the vendors Vanessa had mentioned and some basic online research, I confirmed the costs she'd quoted were accurate. $50,000 was actually conservative for what she wanted. But I also noticed something interesting in her public social media posts. Photos of new designer handbags, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to Miami with Derek. For someone supposedly struggling to afford her dream wedding, she was spending remarkably freely. Then I looked into Derek. My sister's fiancé was 28, professionally charming, and according to his LinkedIn, had started 3 different businesses in the past 4 years. Not sold them, not grown them, just started them and then moved on. His current venture was some kind of cryptocurrency consulting firm that seemed to consist primarily of a sleek website and big promises. I hired a professional background check service, the kind we used at my company for vetting potential hires. The results were illuminating. Derek had $17,000 in outstanding credit card debt, 2 collections accounts, and a history of bounced checks. The engagement ring that had sparkled on Vanessa's finger, financed at 24% interest. But none of that was my business, really. People made financial mistakes. People recovered from them. I wasn't my sister's keeper. Or so I thought until I got the call from my mother's bank. Mr. Chen? This is Patricia from Cascade Credit Union. I'm calling about some unusual activity on your mother's account. We show several large cash advances that seem out of pattern with her normal usage. I wanted to verify these were legitimate transactions before we processed them. My hands went cold. What kind of cash advances? 4 separate transactions over the past 6 weeks, totaling $12,000. The advances were taken at different locations, and the account is now approaching its limit. My mother had a credit card with a $5,000 limit, or at least she'd had one the last time I'd checked. Can you tell me when the credit limit was increased? Patricia's keyboard clicked in the background. It looks like a request was made 7 weeks ago to increase the limit to $15,000. The request came via phone and was verified with your mother's social security number and date of birth. Can you tell me the locations where the advances were taken? More clicking. 2 in Seattle, 1 in Bellevue, and 1 in Tacoma. Would you like the specific addresses? I already knew what I'd find, but I wrote them down anyway. After I hung up, I sat staring at the addresses, my mind racing through possibilities, trying to find an explanation that didn't lead where my gut was already screaming it would. I drove to my mother's house that evening unannounced. She was surprised to see me, inviting me in with the slightly guilty expression she'd worn since Vanessa's campaign had started, like she wanted to be welcoming but felt she was betraying her daughter by being kind to me. Mom, can we talk about your credit card? She blinked at me, genuinely confused. My credit card? Why? The bank called me today about unusual activity, large cash advances. Her confusion deepened. I don't know what you're talking about, honey. I barely use that card. It's just for emergencies. I pulled out my phone and showed her the bank's fraud alert email they'd forwarded me, since I was listed as an authorized contact on her account, something I'd set up after Dad died to help her manage her finances. Her face went pale as she read. Marcus, I didn't make these. I didn't request an increase to my limit. I don't even know how to do a cash advance. I know, Mom. Do you know who else has your social security number and date of birth? I watched the realization dawn on her face, watched her try to reject it, to find another explanation. But there wasn't one. There was only the terrible, obvious truth. Vanessa has all my information, she whispered. She helped me organize my documents last year, said I should have everything in one place in case of emergencies. She made copies of everything, my social, my bank accounts, all of it. I spent the next 3 hours going through my mother's financial documents, and what I found was worse than I'd imagined. It wasn't just the $12,000 in cash advances. There were 3 new credit cards I'd never heard of, all opened in my mother's name within the past 2 months, all maxed out. Total damage, $30,000 in debt that my 68-year-old mother, living on a modest pension and Social Security, would never be able to repay. I need to call Vanessa, my mother said, her hand shaking as she reached for her phone. There has to be an explanation. Maybe someone stole my information, maybe… Mom, I said gently, taking her hand. The cash advances were taken in cities where Vanessa was on those dates. I saw her Instagram posts. The timing matches exactly. She started crying then, deep, wrenching sobs that broke my heart. She wouldn't do this to me. She's my daughter. She's your sister. I know, I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. I know, Mom. But she had. Vanessa had stolen from our mother, had committed identity theft and fraud, all while simultaneously painting me as the villain for not funding her fantasy wedding. I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to press charges, not yet, anyway. My mother was devastated enough without watching her daughter face criminal prosecution. But I was going to document everything, and I was going to stop it. I opened my laptop right there at my mother's kitchen table and started calling credit card companies, filing fraud reports, requesting documentation of how the accounts were opened. I contacted the credit bureaus and placed a freeze on my mother's credit. I gathered statements, logged dates and locations, built a comprehensive case file, and then I did something else. I opened my investment account and transferred $30,000 to my checking account. Over the next week, I paid off every fraudulent charge, every predatory cash advance, every cent my sister had stolen from our mother. I didn't tell Mom what I was doing at first. I just quietly handled it, the same way I'd quietly built my wealth, without fanfare or announcement. The bills stopped coming, the collection calls ceased. I had the fraudulent accounts closed and removed from her credit report. When my mother finally noticed, when she asked me why the creditor harassment had suddenly stopped, I showed her what I'd done. "Marcus, that's your money," she said, tears streaming down her face again. "Your savings. You can't. It's done, Mom, and you're going to pay me back, but not in money. You're going to let me help you manage your finances going forward. No more keeping financial information where Vanessa can access it, and we're going to have a conversation with her together." But Vanessa wasn't returning my calls, and she'd stopped coming by Mom's house as frequently. The wedding planning was in full swing, according to her social media. She'd apparently found the money somewhere, probably maxing out more of Derek's credit cards, or borrowing from his family, or running some other scheme I hadn't uncovered yet. The family reunion was scheduled for mid-July, a tradition we'd maintained for 15 years. Held at my Uncle Robert's property in the San Juan Islands, it was usually a weekend of barbecues, volleyball games, and reminiscing. This year, I almost didn't go. I'd been effectively shunned for months, uninvited from gatherings, treated like a pariah by people who'd once celebrated my accomplishments and welcomed me warmly. But my mother begged me to come. "Please, Marcus. I want both my children there. I want to try to fix this." So I went, driving onto the ferry with a knot in my stomach, carrying a folder of documents I hoped I wouldn't need, but knew I probably would. The reunion was exactly as awkward as I'd anticipated. Relatives greeted me with strained smiles or obvious coldness. My cousin Jason actually turned around and walked the other way when he saw me approaching. Aunt Linda gave me a tight-lipped nod and nothing more. Vanessa was holding court near the outdoor kitchen, surrounded by cousins and aunts, showing off her engagement ring and talking about wedding plans. Derek stood beside her, his arm around her waist, playing the role of devoted fiancé with practiced ease. I kept my distance, helping my Uncle Robert set up tables, making small talk with the few relatives who weren't actively avoiding me. My mother kept looking between Vanessa and me, her expression pained, clearly hoping for some organic reconciliation that wasn't going to happen. Dinner was served at 40 family members gathering around multiple tables arranged in the backyard. I sat at the far end, next to my quiet cousin Maria and her husband, grateful for her earlier kindness in warning me about the Facebook group. We were halfway through the meal when Vanessa stood up, tapping her wine glass with a fork. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment," she announced, her voice carrying across the yard. "I know we're all here to celebrate family, and I wanted to take a moment to thank those of you who have supported Derek and me during our engagement. Planning a wedding has shown me who my real family is." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, and I felt every eye turn toward me. "It's been a difficult few months," she continued, her voice beginning to waver with practiced emotion. "When I asked my only brother for help with the most important day of my life, I never imagined he would not only refuse but say such hurtful things about my choices, about the man I love." Derek squeezed her hand supportively, right on cue. "I've tried to reach out, tried to apologize for whatever I did to make him so angry with me, but he won't even take my calls. So I'm doing this publicly, because I think it's important for everyone to understand what's been happening. Marcus, I know you're here tonight, and I'm asking you in front of our family to please tell me what I did to deserve this treatment. Tell me how to fix this." She was good. She was very good. Her eyes were brimming with tears, her voice breaking in all the right places, her body language radiating wounded innocence. Half the family was already looking at me with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. This was the moment she'd engineered. The public confrontation designed to force me into either apologizing for sins I hadn't committed or looking like a monster in front of everyone we knew. I stood up slowly, and the backyard went completely silent, except for the distant sound of waves against the shore. Vanessa, you're right. We should clear this up in front of the family. I walked over to where my bag sat near the house and pulled out the folder I'd brought. I think everyone deserves to know the whole truth. She blinked at me, uncertainty flickering across her face for the first time. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you didn't just ask me to contribute to your wedding. You asked me for $50,000, 10 times what Derek's parents contributed. And when I offered $5,000 instead, you launched a months-long campaign to turn our entire family against me. That's not... You're twisting things, she started, but I kept talking. I'm talking about the social media posts suggesting I'm heartless and cruel. The private Facebook group where you told everyone I'd insulted Derek and refused all support, when the truth is I offered $5,000 and you rejected it because it wasn't enough. Uncle Robert stood up from the head table. Marcus, if this is about money... It's not about the money, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. It's about the fact that while Vanessa was crying to all of you about how I wouldn't help her, she was stealing from our mother. The silence somehow deepened. Vanessa's face went from flushed to pale in an instant. That's insane, she said, but her voice had lost its confidence. That's a complete lie. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is a credit card statement for an account opened in Mom's name 2 months ago, without her knowledge or permission, maxed out at $8,000. The billing address is Vanessa and Derek's apartment. I handed the paper to Uncle Robert, who took it with shaking hands. This, I continued, pulling out another document, is a cash advance receipt for $5,000, taken the same day Vanessa posted on Instagram about her amazing shopping trip in Bellevue. Want to guess where the cash advance was taken? Marcus, stop, my mother said, her voice breaking, but I couldn't stop. Not now. In total, Vanessa opened 3 new credit cards and increased the limit on Mom's existing card, all using information she copied when she supposedly helped Mom organize her documents last year. $30,000 in debt. $30,000 our 68-year-old mother, living on a pension, would have spent the rest of her life trying to pay off. I pulled out the final document, a printout of my own bank transactions. This is proof that I paid off every cent of that debt myself over the past 6 weeks. I didn't tell anyone because I was hoping Vanessa would come forward, would take responsibility. Instead, she ambushed me here tonight, in front of all of you, demanding I apologize for not funding her wedding. Vanessa was shaking her head, tears now flowing freely. But they looked different from the calculated tears of moments before. You can't prove any of this. You can't prove Vanessa, sweetheart, Derek said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made her stop talking. He was looking at the documents Uncle Robert was now passing around the tables, his expression transforming from supportive fiancé to man realizing he'd been lied to. Is this true? Derek, please, it's not what it looks like. Marcus is manipulating everything. He's always hated you, always wanted to ruin this for us. Is it true? He asked again, louder this time. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was going to pay it back. I just needed to get through the wedding, and then we could... You stole from your own mother, Derek said, taking a step back from her. You told me your brother refused to help. You told me he was cruel and selfish. You made me believe... Jesus Christ, Vanessa. You made me think your whole family was against us. They were. Marcus turned everyone against me because I wanted help with my wedding. You wanted $50,000, I said, and now my own voice was rising. You wanted me to fund your entire fantasy while you were actively stealing from Mom. You turned this family against me with lies, uninvited me from gatherings, convinced everyone I was heartless, all because I wouldn't pay for your party. It's my wedding. It's supposed to be perfect. And Mom's retirement is supposed to be secure. The words came out louder than I intended, echoing across the silent backyard. She's 68 years old, Vanessa. She lost Dad 3 years ago, She lives on a fixed income. And you stole $30,000 from her while simultaneously playing the victim to everyone who would listen. The devastation on my mother's face was almost unbearable. She was crying silently, her shoulders shaking, caught between her children in the most terrible way possible. Aunt Linda had gone very quiet, staring at the documents now spread across her table. Uncle Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. My cousins were exchanging horrified glances, the whole narrative they'd bought for months crumbling before their eyes. "I think you need to leave," Uncle Robert said quietly, looking at Vanessa. "What? No, Uncle Robert, please let me explain." "Leave," he repeated, firmer this time. "Both of you." Derek was already moving, grabbing his jacket from a chair. "I'm sorry," he said to the assembled family, to no one in particular. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know any of this." He walked toward the parking area without looking back. Vanessa stood frozen for a moment, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "This isn't over," she said to me, her voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll tell everyone what you really are. I'll make sure they all know." "That I'm someone who protects his mother?" I asked quietly. "That I refuse to enable your theft? Go ahead, Vanessa. Tell them." She left, practically running to her car, and the sound of her engine starting and tires on gravel faded into the distance. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by my mother's quiet crying. Aunt Linda stood and went to her, wrapping her in a hug, murmuring apologies. One by one, other family members approached, Uncle Robert with tears in his eyes, Cousin Jason looking ashamed, various aunts and uncles who'd spent months treating me like a pariah, now wanting to make amends. "Marcus, I'm so sorry," Uncle Robert said, gripping my shoulder. "I should have asked your side. I should have known better." "We all should have," Aunt Linda added. "We've known you your whole life. We should have realized something didn't add up." I accepted their apologies, hugged them, told them I understood. And I did, mostly. Vanessa had been convincing. She'd weaponized their love of family against me, and it had worked because they wanted to believe her, wanted to support what they thought was a sister wronged by her wealthy brother. Later that evening, after the reunion had awkwardly resumed and people had tried to salvage some normalcy from the wreckage, I sat on the dock with my mother, our feet dangling over the water. "I'm sorry," she said for the 10th time. "I'm so sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I let her convince me. Mom, she's your daughter. You wanted to believe her. I understand. But she stole from me, from her own mother." Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "And I still love her. How terrible is that? After everything she did, I still love her." "That's not terrible," I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. "That's what makes you a good mother. You can love someone and still hold them accountable for what they've done." "What happens now?" I'd been thinking about that all evening. That's up to Vanessa, in a lot of ways. I told her I wouldn't press charges if she got help. Real financial counseling, not just promises to do better. And she has to pay back every cent. Not to me. I don't want her money. But she needs to work out a payment plan and stick to it, even if it takes years. And if she doesn't, then I'll do what I have to do to protect you. Criminal charges, restraining orders, whatever it takes. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the water, the sky turning pink and gold. "Your father would be proud of you," Mom said eventually. "The way you handled this, the way you took care of me. He always said you were the strong one." I thought about my father, about the restaurant that failed, about watching him cry when the bank took everything, about the promise I'd made to never be that helpless. "I learned from watching him," I said, "from watching both of you struggle. That's why I save the way I do, why I live below my means. It's not about being cheap or selfish. It's about being prepared." I know that now. I should have known it all along. Over the next few days, the family fallout continued. Relatives who'd shunned me sent apologetic texts and emails. The private Facebook group was deleted. Aunt Linda called to say she'd always thought something seemed off about Vanessa's story, but hadn't wanted to cause division by questioning it. Derek called me 3 days after the reunion, his voice rough like he hadn't slept. I broke off the engagement, he said without preamble. I can't be with someone who would do that. Who would lie like that? I feel like I don't even know who she is. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Whatever Derek's financial problems, he seemed genuinely blindsided by Vanessa's actions. She's telling people you ruined her life, he continued, that you sabotaged her wedding out of jealousy. Just thought you should know. Thanks for the heads up. And Marcus, thank you for not letting me marry someone who, just thank you. Vanessa herself didn't contact me for 2 weeks. When she finally did, it was via email, not a call or text, maintaining distance, staying in control of the narrative even in defeat. Marcus, I need to talk to you about the repayment plan. Derek left me and I lost my apartment because he was paying half the rent. I'm staying with a friend, but I need to find a new place and I can't do that and pay you back at the same time. Can we work something out? I stared at the email for a long time before responding. Vanessa, you're not paying me back. You're paying Mom back through a structured plan we'll all agree to. If you need help finding affordable housing, I can provide resources. But the debt repayment is non-negotiable. You have a choice. Work with us on this, or I go to the police with the evidence I have. Your call. Her response came within minutes. Fine. We met at a coffee shop a week later with our mother present and worked out the details. Vanessa would pay $200 a month until the debt was cleared. It would take 12.5 years, but it was what she could afford on her income from her influencer work and the part-time retail job she'd taken. She looked diminished somehow, smaller than I'd ever seen her. The carefully curated Instagram presence had taken a hit. She'd lost followers when word of the family drama leaked, and brands had stopped working with her. I'm sorry, she said at the end of our meeting, looking at our mother, then at me. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Sorry you did it or sorry you got caught? I asked, not unkindly, just genuinely curious. She thought about it for a long moment. Both, probably. I don't know. I just wanted something beautiful, something perfect, and I convinced myself I deserved it. That you could afford to give it to me, so you should. I made you the villain in my head, and everything else followed from that. Do you understand what you did to Mom, though? I pressed. Do you understand what $30,000 in debt would have meant for her? Vanessa started crying then, real tears that made her face blotchy and her mascara run. I didn't let myself think about it. I just kept telling myself I'd figure it out. I'd pay it back somehow. I didn't want to see what I was doing. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to undo the months of damage, the lies, the manipulation. But it was something. It was a start. You're getting financial counseling, I said. Not as a punishment, but because you need to understand why you think the way you do about money. And you're going to rebuild your relationship with Mom on her terms, at her pace. If she wants space, you give her space. Okay, Vanessa whispered. Okay. I drove my mother home after the meeting, both of us quiet, processing what had just happened. Do you think she'll actually change? Mom asked. I don't know, I admitted. I hope so. But even if she doesn't, she can't hurt you this way again. We've protected your credit, we've got safeguards in place. And if she violates the agreement, there are consequences. When did you become so wise? Mom asked with a sad smile. When I watched you and Dad lose everything and decided I'd spend my life making sure you were never that vulnerable again. She reached over and squeezed my hand, and we drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. The extended family slowly returned to normal around me, or at least a new version of normal. Uncle Robert insisted I come to the next monthly dinner, making a point of publicly welcoming me and apologizing again in front of everyone. Aunt Linda started a group text with just the family members who'd been kindest during the whole ordeal, a kind of inner circle of people who'd earned trust. And Vanessa made her first payment right on schedule, $200 deposited into Mom's account with a short note. Month 1 of $150. I'm sorry. 3 months later, I got a call from Derek. He'd started dating again, was seeing a financial advisor himself, was getting his life together. "Weirdest thing," he said. "Breaking up with Vanessa was the best thing that ever happened to me. Forced me to look at my own money problems, my own patterns. I'm actually starting to build something sustainable now, not just the flashy startups that go nowhere." Good for you, man. Genuinely. You probably saved my life, you know. If I'd married her, gone into more debt for that wedding, I'd have destroyed myself financially for years. After we hung up, I thought about what he'd said. About how saying no, that single refusal to fund my sister's fantasy, had cascaded into all of this. The revelation of theft, the family reckoning, the forced accountability. If I'd just said yes, if I'd written that $50,000 check, none of it would have happened. Vanessa would have had her perfect wedding. Derek would have married her without knowing who she really was. Mom would have slowly drowned under debt she didn't understand, too ashamed to tell anyone. And I would have enabled all of it, would have been complicit in my sister's self-destruction and my mother's financial ruin. They say that real love means supporting the people you care about. But sometimes support looks like boundaries. Sometimes it looks like saying no when yes would be easier. Sometimes it looks like holding up a mirror and forcing someone to see what they've become, even when it tears the family apart in the process. 6 months after the reunion, my mother and I had dinner at her house. Just the two of us, a new tradition we'd started. She was doing better, had joined a seniors group at the local community center, was taking a watercolor painting class. Vanessa asked if she could come to Christmas dinner. She said carefully, watching my reaction. "What did you tell her?" I said I'd think about it, that I needed to talk to you first. I considered it. Vanessa had made all 6 of her payments on time. She'd completed a financial counseling program and sent Mom the certificate. She'd stopped posting on social media almost entirely. Had gotten a full-time job at a marketing firm, had apparently started seeing a therapist. "It's your house, Mom. Your decision. Whatever you choose, I'll support." "I want her there," Mom admitted, "but not if it makes you uncomfortable." "I'll be fine," I said, "but we're setting boundaries. No wedding talk, no discussions of money, no manipulating relatives. If she violates that, she leaves. Agreed?" "Agreed." Christmas came, and Vanessa showed up with a plate of cookies she'd baked herself and a card for Mom with a handwritten note. She was subdued, careful, almost painfully polite. She asked about my work, told me about her new job, didn't mention the engagement or Derek or any of it. It was awkward, stilted, nothing like the easy sibling relationship we'd had before all this. If we'd ever really had that, or if it had always been built on unstable ground I'd just chosen not to see. But it was something. It was a beginning, or maybe an ending, or maybe just the honest version of what we'd always been to each other. 2 people connected by blood and history, trying to figure out what family means when the fantasy falls apart. As I drove home that night, through the Seattle streets decorated with lights, I thought about the question my mother had asked me months ago. When had I become so wise? The truth was, I wasn't wise. I was just someone who'd learned that love without boundaries becomes enabling, that helping without accountability becomes harm, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to save them from the consequences of their own choices. I thought about my sister, about the girl who'd once shared her Halloween candy with me, who'd cried when our childhood dog died, who'd been my closest companion before life and choices and money had twisted everything into something ugly. I didn't know if we'd ever get back to something resembling a real sibling relationship. Maybe we would, over time, with work and honesty and genuine change. Maybe we wouldn't. Maybe the best we could do was this: civil dinners a few times a year, polite updates about our lives, the careful dance of people who share DNA but not trust. But I knew this. I'd protected my mother. I'd held my sister accountable. I'd shown the family that wealth doesn't make you heartless, and frugality doesn't make you selfish, that sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do. And if that made me wise, then wisdom was just another word for learning hard lessons and refusing to let them break you. I pulled into my apartment parking lot, climbed the stairs to my modest unit, and sat down at my computer to check my investment accounts. A ritual I'd maintained for years, the tangible proof that I was safe, that I was prepared, that I would never be helpless the way my parents had been. The numbers glowed on the screen. larger than they'd been 6 months ago despite the $30,000 I'd spent protecting my mother. Because that's how compound interest works, how patient investing works, how building wealth slowly and steadily works. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for giving your sister another chance. Thank you for being you." I smiled and typed back, "Always, Mom. That's what family does." And I meant it. That was what family did. The real version, not the fantasy version my sister had tried to construct with other people's money. Real family showed up. Real family told the truth, even when it hurt. Real family said no when yes would cause harm. Real family loved each other enough to hold each other accountable, to demand better, to refuse to enable destruction. It had cost me months of stress, $30,000, and a family reputation I'd spent years building. But I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I could stand firm in my convictions, that I could protect the people I loved, and that I could survive my sister's worst and come out the other side with my integrity intact. The price of saying no had been high, but the price of saying yes would have been immeasurably higher. And as I sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the modest life I'd built through discipline and sacrifice and careful planning, I knew I'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the choice that would have made everyone happy in the short term, but the right choice. The choice that protected the vulnerable, held the guilty accountable, and proved that family isn't just about saying yes to whatever is asked of you. Sometimes family is about loving someone enough to say no, and meaning it, and living with whatever comes after.